Women and men have different roles and responsibilities, and therefore, they have different interests and needs, and this involves issues of position, control, and power. Good day everyone, I and my groupmates will be discussing about gender interests and needs. The concept of gender needs is based on the work of Caroline Moser. The understanding of the concept of gender needs will enable you to analyze the position of women in society or institutions. This lesson can help you efficiently and effectively gather information about community attitudes, capacities and practices related to different gender needs. The deeper understanding can enhance to derive gender policies and planning favoring the quality of women. Learning outcomes. At the end of this video, you will be able to identify the difference between gender interest and needs. Give examples of gender needs and explain how policy can be made responsive to these needs. And lastly, you will discover your own strategic and practical gender needs. The empowerment of women, especially the poor and the marginalized, is crucial to sustainable human development. Care-oriented or socialized feminine values must also be prioritized. Women's roles are still determined by development organizations that don't seem to grasp the context or rationale of grassroots women. Caroline Moser highlighted how women's needs are divided into 3 categories in her seminal book entitled Gender Planning and Development: Theory, Practice, and Training to Enable Development Planners to quickly identify programs that can benefit low-income women in developing countries. Gender rules, women's empowerment, access to resource, and decision-making are all on the table. Women are frequently lumped together in development plans and programs. These viewpoints presupposes that all women have the exact wants. As a result, determining a woman's gender preference versus needs in the context of her culture and religious identity is critical. Gender interests are assumed by many to be the same for all those belonging to the same sex. This notion also applies to the gender interests of women. Their gender interests are presumed to be the one and the same because they share similar biological characteristics. However, this view discounts women's socialized gender rules. Maxine Molineux, a feminist often quoted for her ideas on gender interests in different social movements, defines gender interest as an interest that are developed by men or women by virtue of their social positioning through gender attributes. Molineux also suggests the use of the phrase gender interest over women's interest, because the latter has a tendency to focus on the generic notion of women based on their biological similarities.
Practical gender needs. While gender interests are important in gender analysis, their interests should be translated into needs in gender planning. Similar to gender interests, gender needs are of 2 types: practical and strategic. Practical gender needs, in terms of planning, are not necessarily feminist in content. Practical gender needs are concerned with women's immediate needs for survival, nutrition, living condition, healthcare, and employment. These needs are formulated for women's experience, are immediately perceived necessities, and are identified by women themselves in their specific context. Practical gender needs are immediate and specific needs of women and men in their daily lives, such as access to clean water, healthcare, education, employment, and housing. They arise from the gender divisions of labor, which often leads to women being responsible for unpaid care work and men being responsible for income-generating work. PGNs are important to address because they are essential for women and men to live healthy, productive, and fulfilling lives. and they often neglected or overlooked in development planning. Strategic gender needs are the long-term and broader needs of women to challenge gender inequalities and transform power relations. In gender analysis and planning, it is important to consider both practical and strategic needs and engage with women and men as an active participant in the planning process. Recognizing the gender inequalities are complex and intersects with other forms of inequality. Mm, from the last word, the practical, um, yes, it is exactly correct that practical gender needs are formulated from women's experiences and are based on the immediate and perceived necessities that women face in their daily lives. Women themselves are best placed to identify these needs as they are the ones who experience them directly and understand them specific contents in which they arise. For example, women may identify a need for improved access to clean and sanitation in their community, as they are often responsible for collecting water and caring for the health and hygiene of their families. Similarly, women may identify a need for affordable child care service, as they are often responsible for unpaid care work and may face challenges in accessing education and employment opportunities. By engaging with women and as active participant in planning process, development practitioners can gain deeper understanding of the specific needs and challenges that and design interventions that are more responsive and effective. This approach not only helps to address the practical needs of women, but also empowers women to participate in decision making processes and advocate for their own rights and interests. For summary, in summary rather, while addressing PGNs or practical gender needs is essential for promoting gender equality, it is important to recognize that the focus of practical gender needs alone does not necessarily involve a feminist approach or content. To achieve gender equality and social justice, development planning needs to address both practical needs and strategic gender needs and engage with women and men as an active participant in planning process. That's
Strategic gender needs. Strategic gender needs are those that stem from a woman's strategic gender interests due to her socialized gender roles as a woman, one who has a subordinate position to men in their society. There are needs that are rooted in gender inequality, lack of political representation, the unfair gender division of labor, violence against women, and non-observance of equal pay. Women's practical gender needs often involve their roles in the household as primary agents in the reproduction sphere. Their roles may include childcare, food provision, housework, and often augmented income for the household. Much of the practical gender needs that development planners target involve these domestic roles. According to Moser, unequal gender division of labor and the structures that support unequal gender relations are not sufficiently challenged by merely addressing practical gender needs. Dealing with practical gender alone will not transform social structures and processes. Meanwhile, strategic gender needs are women identified because of their subordinate position to men in their society.
Challenges for the fulfillment of gender needs in the Philippines. Gender inequality and the environment disaster are two of the most today's pressing issues. As we get a deeper understanding of and create links between gender, social equality, and climate change, it is essential to take action towards solutions. Progress toward a gender equitable and sustainable future begins with taking action now, from boosting women's presence in leadership and decision making to rebalancing care work and productive resources. The worldwide objective of achieving gender equality, which includes abolishing all kinds of discrimination against women and girls and ensuring their safety, is critical to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs. Its achievements implies that everyone, regardless of gender, has the opportunity to develop their full potential. This requires giving men and women equal access to education, paid jobs, and actual decision making authority in both the commercial and governmental sectors. This topic focuses more on how we can fulfill the challenges in gender needs. The Philippine enacts gender mainstreaming are the strategy for the inclusion of a gender perspective in all policies and programs. However, Philippine gender literature only assumes two genders, which are male or female, and that one's sex is the same as one's gender, or biologically male persons are all masculine and biologically female persons are all feminine. Now, gender mainstreaming has been widely accepted across the world as a technique for achieving gender equality. It entails incorporating a gender perspective into the development, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies, regulatory measures, and spending programs in order to promote gender equality and combat discrimination. Now, let us connect in terms of educational attainment. I have a question here. How can gender mainstreaming improve our educational system? Education is beneficial on a personal, societal, and economic level, but gender inequality means only one gender has benefited from it. For example, because males have historically benefited from the education system, girls and women have only recently been allowed to go to school. Therefore, gender mainstreaming in education eliminates harmful gender roles in the classroom and related work environments. As a result, we can ensure that girls and women have equal access to educational opportunities, thereby contributing to the needed transformation to a better education system, committing to the process, and following the steps of gender mainstreaming thoroughly can effectively address equality. It also promotes youth empowerment, which has a high potential for youth led innovation solution to improve learning quality. In gender perspective, it focuses on gender based differences in status and power and how such discrimination shapes women's and men's immediate needs as well as long term interests. Taking a gender perspective in policy is a strategy for incorporating women's and men's concerns and experiences into the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs in all political, economic, and societal spheres so that women and men benefit equally and inequality is not perpetuated. Gender sensitive program designs include childcare facilities, flexible work hours, and sex quotas in governance structures to encourage women's participation. A comprehensive, publicly financed social pension plan for women would take into consideration women's longer life expectancy, gender differences in labor force participation, the burden of unpaid care duties, and the capacity of women of various ages to pay to the pension scheme. To satisfy legal human rights requirements, women should be provided equal opportunity in decision making processes, and accountability procedures should be available to both men and women. Gender perspective and gender mainstreaming are connected with each other because both have the goal to achieve the gender equality. This thinking ignores the existence of LGBT persons or persons who do not fall categorically into masculine or feminine roles. Another concern is that gender needs are equated to women's specific, practical, and strategic gender needs. Gender writing in the Philippines presupposes just two genders, which are male and female, and denies the presence of LGBT people. Gender needs are defined as practical and strategic gender requirements for women because gender and women are not defined in important gender mainstreaming documents such as the Magna Carta of Women. Therefore, there are still confusion. This presupposes homogeneity and disregards LGBT people's gender requirements. Enacting policies and legislation frequently presumes these women are the same and face comparable variables impacting their access to resources and constituting needs. Men and women have various roles in current cultures and organizations. As a result, their requirements differ. Typically, two sorts of needs are identified, which are practical needs and strategic needs, as mentioned in gender interest. The real situations that women and men face as a result of the gender roles given to them in society give birth to practical requirements. Strategic requirements are those that are necessary to overcome women's subordinate to males in society and are related to women's empowerment. They differ depending on the social, economic, and political environment in which they are expressed. That would be all the topics discussed in Chapter 8 entitled Gender Interests and Needs. In reporting on this kind of topic, we discovered that our practical gender needs relate to physical conditions and immediate needs, which includes food, shelter, work, and water. Therefore, our strategic gender interests relate to status in society, for instance, in terms of access to employment, inheritance, mobility, political, and social participation that is based on gender. These needs relate to control. However, we are more likely to achieve lasting and sustained impact by addressing strategic gender interests. Women and men have different roles and responsibilities and therefore have different interests and needs.